In October of last year, the Counter-Strike scene was blindsided when the best player to ever play the game announced that he would be taking an extended break for the first time since he first burst onto the scene all the way back in 2013. S1mple had climbed the mountaintop and sat atop the throne as the best player in Counter-Strike for many years, and as a new age of CS dawned upon us with the release of a new game, for the first time, that throne would be abdicated deliberately, leaving the fans and most importantly his teammates in NAVI stunned and unsure of what to do next. And despite signing promising new talent in the 19-year-old Opera and Wonderful, NAVI came into the first few tournaments of CS2 struggling. Many people had doubts about the ability of this roster to compete at the highest level and win tournaments. Could Aleksib be the leader this team needed and help these young players come together to be more than the sum of their parts? These were the questions that were being asked at the time, and along with that came very little expectation to strike out and win big events, which is what made Navi's run at the first CS2 major at Copenhagen so spectacular. They outperformed expectations in many ways, JL stepping onto the superstar stage for the first time, Wonderful at times looking like a 19-year-old phenom with the big green in his hand. Bit, the last remaining member from that Navi squad that won the PGL major back in 2021, was now once again showing that form on the big stage when they needed it most, all being piloted by Aleksib, proving himself, vindicating his career after being a journeyman in-game leader and showing that he's not just a great in-game leader, but one of the very best in the world. All of this while the best player to ever play Counter-Strike was on the sidelines cheering them on. Unfortunately, a major win seemed to only make a confusing situation muddier because now the questions got even more difficult. Do you break up a lineup just after winning the biggest trophy in the game? Those are the questions that Navi were facing, and considering the back half of their season leading up to the player break was rocky right up until the very end, their very last event at the Blast Spring Finals, that meant that those roster questions got even more frequent. So now we're here, we're in the player break. So what does Navi do to solve this simple problem? My name is LionHeartZ, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to try and answer that question. Should Navi be looking to make a roster swap, bringing the GOAT off the bench, or should they be looking to try and sell S1mple while his value is at its highest? Those are the questions we're going to be tackling today, but before we get started, make sure you guys take a second, leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It helps out immensely in the YouTube algorithm, and many of you watch these videos are not subscribing, so make sure you do it. While you're down there, consider becoming a channel member for $5 a month. You can support me directly when we do here, gain access to these kinds of videos the night before anyone else, as well as a shout out at the end of every video. And lastly, check me out on Twitch, link in the description down below, and let's get on with the commentary. Alright, first things first, let's take a look at the current Navi roster and see if we can draw any conclusions about how they've played over the last handful of months. So when you pull up the stats on HLTV, what stands out right away is that JL, Wonderful, and Bit are all about at the same level in terms of production. Obviously, there are some gaps and differences in playstyle. You'll typically see Wonderful with a better kill differential overall, but that could be a product of a lot of things. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's like substantially better than his teammates, but you know, as a primary opper, you are focused on surviving as many rounds as possible because the more rounds that you live, the more rounds you keep the op in your hands, the more likely you are to maximize your impact because the op is so expensive, right? We can see that it makes sense. Overall, the production is pretty good. Emma is their worst non-in-game leader player, but he's really, he's a support player, so his stats don't have to be jumping off the page at me. They're not even that bad, and he's had good performances over this period, so it's not like he's just a dead weight, sub 1 rating player. No, he's doing his job, he's getting his production when he needs it, and he's fulfilling his role on the team. He plays the spots that JL and Bit don't want to, and that's really important, something we'll touch on more later. The other thing that stands out is that Navi is not a team with one overwhelming star player on it. There is no superstar 1.2, 1.3 rating player like ZywOo on Vitality or Donk on Spirit. When you compare the stats, Navi are a lot more like a FaZe or a Mouse, whereas the sum of the parts of the team make the greater whole. There isn't just one player that you are relying on to be the carry, or your team is significantly weaker when he underperforms. No, it's an ensemble performance, which is good. That tends to be the roster construction that is the most consistent. I mean, we all know the issues that teams like Vitality have had when their big superstar carry goes missing. It's obviously very hard to make up for that gap in impact. So on the face of it, there's no player who's drastically underperforming expectations to the point where you're like, okay, we need to obviously get rid of him. There's no like Nexa on G2 here or Skulls on Team Liquid. There's not a player who's just stinking up the joint. So that makes making a change a lot harder to justify. There needs to be a great reason to want to break up this roster and bring S1mple back in. And most importantly, I think we need to consider stylistically, how does S1mple fit into this lineup in a way that doesn't break up what they have going on? The reality is that s1mple as a player is a large presence. He's a large ego, and that's granted, it's warranted. He's the best player to ever play the game, but he also imposes himself upon his teams. The teams need to be built around s1mple. s1mple is the main focus of any roster he is on. So is that going to take away from players like JL, take away from players like Wonderful? Will it undermine the in-game leadership of a person like LionHeartZ? These are the questions that you need to be asking if you're NAVI and you're trying to make a move right now. So when it comes back to the current NAVI roster, when I look at it, I have no clue who you would drop from this team to bring s1mple back in that doesn't cause immediate chaos. You have Emma, the support player, you have Bit, who is a great anchor, a great rifler, you have JL, who is a star rifler and a pretty aggressive player who plays a lot like s1mple does with his rifles, and you have Wonderful, who is a 19-year-old opper who I believe in interviews has said that he models his opping after s1mple. Now, we know that s1mple has indicated in recent interviews that he is willing to come back as a hybrid. He doesn't want to take the op out of a main opper's hands if he feels that opper is good enough. He's willing to rifle only if that's what best fits the team. So the question is he going to try and take the op out of Wonderful's hand if he doesn't respect his game? Or is he willing to step down and just be a rifler next to JL or Bit? Are you going to get rid of Emma and swap s1mple into Emma's spot? Because if you do that, then who's going to play the support role? Are you going to ask Bit or JL to take a step back from their roles and contribute to the spots that Emma was taking to take up his slots? Well, on paper, yes, I agree. The pure fragging talent of a roster with LionHeartZ as IGL, JL and s1mple as your star duo, Bit as your third rifler, kind of the Rain archetype for this team, and then Wonderful as the young star talent opper. Man, that team on theory I think goes really, really hard, but it would have to come with a lot of changes. I think you'd have to ask LionHeartZ to make up for some of the roles that Emma was taking up. Would he be willing to make those sacrifices, and could he do them as well as Emma might have? Those are the types of questions that we have to start asking, because you know that s1mple, no matter what he says or what he indicates, he needs to be the guy. s1mple's not going to step down and play support roles or be the second man in. That's just not in his nature. And as far as I know, Bit and JL themselves have never played that role either. So really that just leaves it to LionHeartZ's shoulders. He would have to kind of morph himself into a Kerrigan role where now he has to take on all of the worst spots and make it so that his stars have the best opportunity to play. And is he willing to do that, and can he do that at a high enough level while maintaining what he's already done so far as the leader of this team? My last issue, and I think this might be the biggest one, is would s1mple be able to step back and respect that LionHeartZ is the leader of this team and he is the guy in charge? s1mple unfortunately has a history of butting heads with his in-game leaders, especially when he thinks the game should go a different way. So if we end up in a spot where s1mple doesn't agree with how things are going, is he going to try and muscle his way between LionHeartZ and the rest of the team and try and impose his will on the game? Because I do not trust s1mple to make the same high-level calling that LionHeartZ does, but does s1mple trust LionHeartZ to make those calls? That's going to be a big factor if he does return in terms of the team's potential success. How well does s1mple buy into the system? So if it's not abundantly clear, while NAVI is by no means a top team in the world, I think right now they could potentially do a lot more harm to themselves to try and bring s1mple back into this lineup. I think just on paper, there are far too many questions and concerns to make it warranted to go through with that. The other big problem, unfortunately, is that NAVI might be running out of time. Everything that s1mple has indicated is that he wants to make a return to CS2 soon. In HLTV interviews, he's indicated that he wants to come back to a team during the player break, whether that's with NAVI or not. So NAVI are faced with a really interesting issue here. Do they trade away the best player ever because he's not the right fit? Or do they take a risk on a lineup that has shown some bright spots, has shown some great potential, and blow it up and force s1mple back into it? And honestly, trying to trade away s1mple doesn't sound like it would be that easy either, because who's going to want to pay what I would imagine would be the biggest buyout in Counter-Strike history for someone who has not played the game in close to a year? Now, I have no doubts that given enough time, s1mple will come back and be a force in CS2. It just defies reality that he would somehow come back and not be a top player in the game. But the question is, how long would it take, and how long would a team be willing to wait for him to get back to that level? When I look at other teams that are trying to potentially make a roster move right now, frankly, some of them sound like joke answers for where S1mple could end up. Like, oh, well, you know, we'll send S1mple to Team Liquid. Him and Twist and Naf will form the best 3-man core in the world. Or G2 signed S1mple. S1mple and Nico together. Nico needed S1mple to get his first major. The best roster ever fucking constructed. FaZe signed S1mple. Drop Frozen, Kerrigan, and S1mple together. Can anyone stop them? The answer might surprise you. It's no. So all jokes aside, I don't know if anyone's going to actually want to buy S1mple or if they're going to be able to make that deal happen before the player break is over. S1mple wants to come back before the player break is over. NAVI probably wants to get rid of him before the player break is over, but who the hell is going to drop the money on him? And when? These next few weeks are going to be very interesting because if S1mple is going to want to make a move, he has to make it soon. He wants to be back in time to compete in the first tournament starting in July. So yeah, I don't know what the future looks like for S1mple. I mean, he spent all this time working on this training course. You know, it's funded by ESL, which is a separate issue. You know, that's an obvious conflict of interest. I don't know what the hell happens with that. Can ESL be funding players' pet projects while they also compete in their tournaments? Who knows? Apparently conflict of interest doesn't exist anymore, so it's probably not an issue, but it's definitely still weird. So like maybe NAVI don't even want to bring him back just to make sure they avoid any potential issues. That's definitely something I could see being real. So then our other teams could be hesitant because of this relationship? I don't know. It definitely makes things muddier than it needs to be, and muddy is definitely what this whole situation is. Because on one hand, I think most people were expecting NAVI to make a move had they not won the major. Then they come out of nowhere, win the major, and yeah, they have slip-ups in the tournaments after, but they end the season looking strong. And when you look at the stats, and you look at how they've placed in the various events, they haven't been terrible. So do you break up what's going on? Do you stop this young core from developing just to reinsert S1mple because he's the best player? Yeah, I don't know. It's all very confusing. I don't know what the future holds for S1mple or for NAVI. All we can do is wait and watch out, and you can rest assured, the moment we have any news on this, I will be here, I'll be talking about it, and we'll see where it goes from here. Get in those comments. I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Do you think S1mple should go somewhere else, and do you have a team that he should go to? Let me know your recommendations in the comments down below. Should he come back to NAVI? Do you think they should be dropping one of their players to bring S1mple back in? I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Let's talk about it. While you're down there, make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. All that good stuff. While you're down there, consider becoming a channel member for $5. You can support me and what we do here. All that good stuff. Shout out to my channel members, Justin, Jesse, Furley, and Bubblesj. Thank you guys for keeping the lights on. Follow me on Twitch. I'll see you guys soon with another video, and peace.